All right. All right, everybody. What's up? This is Blaze here over at Blue Chip Athletic Club. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about knee health. I've been going through this kind of normal spiel here before any of these weekly webinars, just so that everybody can kind of get an idea of who we are and what we kind of do here. So real quick background on me. I've been all ends of the spectrum, the 155-pound kid soaking wet. He wanted to be more athletic and stronger, bigger, and faster. And then I've been the 230-pound guy who almost got kicked out of naval flight training for being too heavy for the ejection seat. So kind of all walks of life here, playing sports since I was a kid. What I didn't know, doesn't take over 2 hours of working out per day in the gym to kind of have the body that you want and the confidence that you desire. Understanding your body, listening to it, and working to improve is way more effective. I train hard, but only for about 45 minutes a day, and I frequently will take rest days that kind of look a lot different than when I took them in my earlier days of training. So we can definitely chat about those types of things in another webinar. And now I'm feeling the strongest, fittest that I've kind of ever been, and hope to continue to deliver that to you guys so you can have a similar shift in your health and wellness. So what I want to talk about today is knee health. In general, the goal of this webinar is going to be to chat about how we can rebuild and bulletproof our knees kind of from the ground up. And I think it's going to be super important as we move forward so that we're able to kind of continually make progress in the realm of knee health in general, as well as just, being a healthy person who wants to continue to move, be athletic, go on hikes, spend time with your family, etc. But first, before we kind of get into a lot of those things, I want to talk a little bit about anatomy of the knee and how it relates to kind of other pieces of the skeletal chain. So stay with me through this. I'm not going to go super, super hard, but I'm going to kind of give a brief, quick little overview here. So we've got a couple different bones that kind of come together. We've got up here at the top, we're going to have the femur that comes into the patella right here at the kneecap. And then we've got the tibia and fibula that kind of make up the the bone and skeletal structure here of the knee. We've got the LCL here that's kind of out on the outside, as well as the MCL, which kind of goes up in here around the inside here. We've got the ACL and then the PCL that kind of lock in place here. So to kind of go through this, the MCL and LCL are essentially designed to keep our knees from moving too far left and right. So let's say you're making a cut as like an athlete side to side or doing like skater hops. Like this is what's going to kind of keep your knee in place when you're doing that. And then your ACL and PCL are keeping your knee from going too far forward and back. So that's going to kind of keep yourself kind of strictly in that kind of socket there where your knee kind of sits with your meniscus so that you're able to stay super healthy. Your muscles and tendons above and below the knee obviously are going to attach to a bunch of different points. So your quads attached to a bunch of different spots along the hip, as well as down by the knee, and the same with your calves that are going to attach kind of below down towards like the ankles and your feet. So what I want to kind of stress is that although knee pain may be something that kind of presents itself at the knee, that doesn't necessarily mean that knee pain is caused by your knee or some issue in your knee. It may be just a general byproduct of some other issue that you kind of have going on in regards to your mobility, flexibility, or just type of lifestyle. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So I just want to talk real quick about a couple common knee issues. Osteoarthritis is one of them. It's a degenerative condition where the cartilage in the knee joint kind of wears down over time. Stiffness, pain, decreased range of motion, all these things kind of end up happening. A lot of times it happens with older adults, but it can also happen for increased wear and tear if you're somebody who's been like running or, ultra athletes. Those types of guys sometimes can have this in their later years. We've got PFPS or patello, and please, if I pronounce this wrong, please don't laugh at me. Patellofemoral pain syndrome, which is like runner's knee. Essentially what this is it's a pain behind the kneecap. It's often exacerbated by, running, squatting, climbing stairs, and typically is something that happens from overuse and some sort of biomechanical issue with the way that you stride, the way that you step, the mobility of your ankles and feet or of your hips as well. Meniscus tears are another thing that's super popular. It's that little rubbery cartilage that kind of cushions your shin. And what I'll do is I'll kind of pop back here. We kind of gloss right over that. Meniscus is going to be right here at the bottom, kind of under the patella. If you have a meniscus tear or injury, it's something that kind of is just going to decrease over time and kind of take a bite out of that cartilage. And typically is more prevalent in older people, but also is something that you can get from, heavy twisting or athletic movement, lifting weights incorrectly. Those types of things are definitely something that are prevalent in athletes, especially. You can get ligament injuries. So ACL and PCL, MCL, we kind of talked about those things and what their roles are. But if we're not kind of putting ourselves into the position that we need to when we're doing athletic movement, sometimes that can kind of hurt us and cause it to pain, swell, and or tear, and cause us to kind of be set back a ton in our health and wellness journeys. Tendonitis is going to be inflamed tendons around the knee. So patellar tendon, quads. A lot of times that's from overuse, repetitive motion, sudden increase in activity level. So if you're somebody who's been super, super sedentary, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go super hard and working out. Typically that's when you're going to start to develop these types of things. IT band syndrome. It's when the IT band, which is the iliotibial band, is a thick band that basically runs around the outside of the thigh, becomes inflamed. And I'm not actually sure if this picture's got it, but essentially what it does is going to attach here around the outside of the knee and kind of run down and actually goes all the way up towards your hip. And what that's going to be is, you're causing that band to be super, super tight. And what it does, it kind of pulls around the outside of the knee and then can cause a bunch of pain. It's typically happens when you're running or cycling, and it becomes tight and inflamed. And then bursitis is the last one, which is basically like small fluid filling the sacs in the knee joint, where it basically will cause thing to be inflamed as well. And typically will be like pain, swelling, and tenderness all around the affected area. So my goal for all of you is to avoid all of these knee issues. And if you have them, try and find a way that we can measure and fix those issues. And that's what we're going to kind of get into today. So how do we fix them? How do we fix all those things that I went through? I know I got kind of technical in there and I'm sorry for that, but what it essentially will come down to is understanding that your pain and the pain point that you have is rarely the root cause of your said pain. So even though you have a tear or an injury, let's say, I tore my meniscus, a lot of times it's like you could have a happenstance injury, but more than likely you had something that gradually ended up wearing down. Your form was incorrect when you're running, your mobility kind of suffered, and you weren't able to move in that joint the way that you need to. So you ended up hurting yourself over time. Big keys in any sort of knee pain are going to be improving your hip and ankle mobility. And we'll talk a lot about that here in the rest of this presentation. And then utilizing functional movement that's not painful as much as possible to build knee resilience. And we'll also talk about kind of strategies to do that as well as we move forward. All right. So I want to talk about the immobile athlete. So believe it or not, this was me back in college here playing lacrosse at the old Coast Guard Academy. And what I want to kind of highlight is I was an athlete that played college sports, but I had 2 busted knees. I had sprained MCL and meniscus in both knees. You can see me rocking 1 knee brace here, but I actually ended up using 2 at one point. I had sleeves. It was really, really not good for my knee health, my overall athleticism and ability to kind of perform. What happened was I gained like 50 pounds of muscle within the muscle, and there's probably some body fat in there as well. I'm not going to get it twisted and act like I was just putting muscle on there. But at the end of the day, I put on like 50 pounds of weight from the time that I was a freshman to the time that I was a senior at school. So 4 years, 50 pounds is a lot. Strength training, taking 22 credits, being a mechanical engineer at school, very, very minimal options for nutrition. And basically what it led to is, again, having sprained MCL meniscus in both knees. I actually partially tore my labrum as well on my shoulder. So all of that to say, I don't want any of you or anybody who ever listens to this to have that happen to you. And I want you to learn from my mistakes and be better than I was when I was a dumb 20-year-old that just wanted to pick up heavy weights and be the best lacrosse player this side of the Mississippi. So make sure that you guys like take this seriously. It's going to really, really help you moving forward. So I'm going to kind of go through my specific situation, and then we're going to talk through about a couple different ways how this can kind of manifest. So here's an example of kind of the root cause for my specific situation, what could end up happening if you are, plagued with something similar. So without getting too far into the weeds, I'm going to kind of break it down. So this is like again, side profile of the knee. So this is, my body or your body potentially now, where things are kind of relatively balanced between your quads and your hamstrings. And this is a super watered down example, but I'm going to kind of go through it as well. So and then this side is somebody who's put on, more body fat or more muscle mass on their quads, but haven't really trained their hamstrings to have that kind of, we'll call like evenness across the joint. So imagine now this is a larger mass that's got more muscle, and now there's more tension that's going to be placed on the knee, which is going to pull this knee up and forward. And now you're going to end up sliding this in, and there's going to be more impact. There's going to be more weight. There's going to be more stress on that joint with this person who's going to be quad dominant because they're not as balanced from side to side. So another example, this sweet soccer player is taking an awesome cut here. But imagine you're somebody who was, 20, 30, 40 pounds lighter, and then you're making this same aggressive move. You put on 10, 20, 30, 40 pounds of muscle, and you're out there kicking a ball with your kids, or you're out there doing something athletic. You're getting all that extra mass and all that extra weight on that joint. And it's something that you need to be super mindful of as you start to progress. So, what happens to the knee if you do that over time? If you're lucky, nothing could happen. But if you're unlucky, you could end up causing some serious damage and really setting yourself back. So what I want to talk about is kind of how to combat that. And the real, brass tacks is coming down to your joint mobility and your flexibility. So if you put on weight, whether that's muscle or fat, and you don't improve your joint mobility and flexibility, you will end up getting hurt. It's an unfortunate reality. As we get older, our joints are typically the first thing to kind of go, if you will. And the reason is because as you age, you become more sedentary. You have a job, you have kids, you have all these other things that kind of drive you into either sitting or just being less active as you start to age. And as that happens, your joints are going to be under immense stress. You're going to be tighter. These other things are going to happen. So what are some actionable things that we can do? And I know I alluded to it before. It's going to be improving your hip and ankle mobility. I know it sounds silly, but knee pain being caused by your hips and ankles kind of, seems a little bit far-fetched, but what I want you to do is kind of hear me out and the way that I kind of break this down. So starting with the hips. So this is, standard, we'll call American working position, maybe with a desk here on the side. But most people in the world, especially in the US, are going to spend, 8 hours of their day in this exact position, right? We call this hip flexion, where your knees are kind of bent here at this 90-degree angle. Imagine like for 8 hours, like 8 hours is an unreal amount of time to be sitting there. Your body, your muscles are kind of locked in place the majority of the day. You're not getting into extension, which would be kind of like standing tall and making your body into like, we'll call like a bow stylish shape with your hips. And what's happening is your body kind of ends up adapting to your natural surroundings. In this position, muscles stop firing off over time, and it starts to really affect your balance in your muscular system, so that you're able to kind of develop some sort of pain that's going to be deferred in another part of the body. So think about this, compounding, lack of firing off of the muscles, and extension with the training muscles on top of that. So think about if you're somebody who is quad dominant in your training, and then you end up coupling that with muscles that don't fire off very frequently, well, you're going to actually aggravate that condition. Your knee becomes the knee that we discussed before. You're getting pulled in different directions. You have huge imbalances, tightening up over time, and then it's just going to cause you more and more pain. So how do we improve our hip mobility? The biggest things that I think that we can do is start off with really simple movements. I've actually got links on all of these, and I'm not sure if I should actually plan, but I guess I can in here really fast. Maybe I'll mute it up, and I'll kind of just throw it over here too. But just envisioning your body kind of moving through space and making sure that you're really, really smart about the way you move. And I'll mute this here. a really simple move that you can do is just a knee 90 side to side. You know, your hips are moving through a ton of different ranges of motion. I've got a weight here kind of in my lap, which is going to add a little bit of resistance there. That's a great move that you can do. And I'll just click on a couple of these. And again, I can send these out to all of you guys that end up listening to this as well. But another thing, you know, we talk about banded mobilization of tissue. And of course, we're going to get an ad. Thank you for for that here too. Thanks, YouTube. But we talked through, like, you know, having some more other tools that we can use to kind of do this, and we can get banded glute activation where we're going to work some of those muscles that are really, really tense, or there's something that doesn't really work very much, are going to be the outer glute because of the way that we sit. So we can start to add bands into our day-to-day mobility routine, and then start to train those muscles so that we're able to kind of continue to fire off. So again, I've got a list of all these that I can kind of go through a little bit more detail later on, but I just want to kind of hit on, you know, hip mobility, like knee 90s, pigeons, banded hip mobilization movements, touchdown squats, training the inner and outer glutes. All these things are going to be super, super effective in combating your knee pain. And it's going to be something that you need to continually work on over time, and you'll start to see that pain go away. So let's talk about them ankles now. Kind of belabored the hip point, and want to kind of talk about the other important link in the chain, which is the ankles. So I used to be a skateboarder when I was a kid. Another kind of story to help you see kind of how important the ankles are. I skateboarded like a madman until I was probably 12 or 13. And that came with a ton of ankle injuries. I feel like every other day I was rolling ankles. What I didn't realize is that when I was doing that and I never truly healed my ankles, I basically just threw a brace on and let it rip and continued to skate. I really, really took away from my ankle flexibility, which, you know, I didn't really notice until I was in my 20s, and conducted a kind of movement assessment that found that a ton of my tightness was in my ankles, and they were incredibly stiff, which actually made it tougher for me to run. It made it tougher for me to do body weight squats. It made it tougher for me to kind of stay mobile. So my body was really, really suffering from my inability to kind of address my ankle mobility issues. So what I'm going to talk about here is kind of how your ankle movement will affect your knees, and how it kind of will affect your running form, and then also kind of trickle down into causing some pain. So let's talk about ankles being super stiff. So what I want to talk about is the ankle dorsiflexion, which is basically the angle between, and I'm going to flip to the next page here for a second. I'll come back. It's going to be this angle here between your shin and your foot that we're going to be primarily talking about here. So ankle dorsiflexion. And what that is the, you know, there's been a study that was conducted that essentially, like, and I'm going to quote it here, decreased ankle dorsiflexion caused people to have stiffer landings on jumping when they were jumping and running, which caused more pain in their knees due to that decreased range of motion. So AKA, if you are somebody who struggles with knee pain, it's likely that your ankles are tight and you're not able to move in this ankle dorsiflexion type of manner. And then it's also causing your knees to valgus, which I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, which is basically like knee caving, because that's the only natural path that your legs can take along the way. So how do we know if we have enough ankle flexion? Well, we can do what's called the wall test and check out if we have kind of knee valgus when we're doing movements. So the wall test, pretty simple to set up. You basically, to get this distance off of the wall, you can just use your palm of your hand and kind of put it down on the wall and then step your foot back. If your knee is able to touch the wall from about that palm distance, I believe it's like 4 or so inches, it means that your ankle dorsiflexion is pretty good. If you're struggling to do that, it's likely that your ankle dorsiflexion is causing some of your knee pain, and it's something that we can address and kind of improve upon. The other thing is going to be this knee valgus here that we're going to talk about, which is kind of this knee knock position. So if you're somebody that squats and you notice that it's really, really tough for your knees to kind of be in this normal or even like kind of bowed outward position, which is called varus, then more than likely you also have an issue with your ankle mobility, which, imagine running, you know, on this type of form. this is not like one line, right? All this stress now, as this force is coming down, imagine like an arrow coming down straight down at the ground, is being placed on those MCL, LCL on the outside, and then going to cause some issues in your knees. So, addressing the mobility issues is going to be kind of the biggest thing that I wanted to harp on today. So how do we improve ankle mobility? A couple of things we can do. We can foam roll the calves and the shins. We can strengthen the ankles with banded joint mobilizations. We can do knee over toe movements like lunges and sissy squats. And I can go over a couple of these really fast. I'm going to open them up. Hopefully these work here. So just stick with me for a hot second. Maybe I'll wait to put it over there until I know there's not an ad. That's what we call learning there. All right. So one thing that you can do if you're somebody who only has access to kind of like a kettlebell is you can do a tibialis raise. Notice how I've got the kettlebell here shooting through the foot. Basically, all I'm going to do is let it pull my foot down. It's going to open up that range of motion down towards the floor, and then I'm going to pick it up with my foot. They make some training aids that are really, really good for this, but if you only have access to a kettlebell, this is a super simple move that you can do kind of on your own or at almost any gym that you have access to. Knee over toe movements are going to be really, really key when you're trying to improve your dorsiflexion as well. So if you can couple this with another move, and I write a lot of our programs for mobility days in this manner so that we're able to kind of couple these movements, you'll start to see that you can pull, and I'm talking through this video, but I'm not going to turn the volume off. I'm basically pulling down on the bench here and then coming up and over so that I can improve my dorsiflexion, which is, again, that angle between the shin and the top of the foot. And then I'm going to kind of come off of it, straighten my calf, or almost do like a calf raise like that. And then it's going to take the tension off, and then I'm going to repeat the pattern. So a couple different things that you can do while you're working through it in your own practice so that you can start to improve that. And then we can also do knee over toe lunges and sissy squats. I'm not going to click those videos here too to belabor that point. But what I want to make sure that we understand is the key to the knee pain is going to come from the hips and the ankles. All right. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about is a quick, functional movement that everybody can do. And it's really, really simple. And it's just walking backwards. You can do this with a sled if you have access to that at the gym that you're at. You can walk with your dog. You can go on a normal walk and walk backwards. What this does is it trains your knee over your toe, which will actually incentivize your body to have more ankle dorsiflexion. It improves your hip mobility as well because you're pushing off behind you and putting your body or your hips, into extension. And it's going to help. It's essentially the most regressed way for you to help build up those things. So if any of those other movements, mobility movements or whatever, are causing you pain, I suggest starting with walking backwards or pulling a sled backwards. It can be super, super helpful. So what does it take to stay healthy and improve your knee health, your health in general? You guessed it, it's going to be mobility training. If you're doing it correctly, you're going to put your body into positions that it's not really used to being in. You're going to be testing end range of motions, micro movements that are unfamiliar, kind of like this Jefferson curl here. Your movement may look nothing like this, but it's something that we can kind of train and continue to progress and regress if we need to. So definitely don't be afraid to reach out to me or any of your other coaches as you're going through the program if you need a regression while you're doing that. So what's the catch of mobility training? Well, it's not super flashy, right? It's not like you're not bench pressing. You may feel kind of weird because the movements are unfamiliar to you, or maybe other people will look at you and be like, what the heck is that guy or girl doing? That's okay. If you want the same results as everybody else, train like everybody else. But if you want results that are totally unique and totally going to help you live the life that you want, stick to this. And I promise you that it's going to be good. So make sure that you watch a demo video. If you're telling yourself like, hey, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that, what I would say and what I ask from you is to just do your best and forget the rest. I don't know if any of you guys ever did P90X, but when I was a kid, I thought I was going to get shredded like the P90X guy. And he would just always say, do your best and forget the rest and just keep kind of chugging along. So what I'd say is, yes, you can do the movements. Yes, you can make progress. Yes, you can do it with practice and reap the benefits as we've kind of discussed before. And that's kind of all I've got for you guys today. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and we'll see you guys in the next webinar. All right, I'm gonna stop this share. I'm gonna stop this recording, hopefully.